when you go over the Bob Lazar story, like what do you? How much of you cries bullshit? How much of you's like,
I'm more on the side. I think he's the most credible whistleblower because he...
For years, the Bob Lazar story was dismissed as pure science fiction. Flying saucers, secret bases, government cover-ups, and a mystery element that shouldn't exist. But now, new discoveries and explosive footage are changing everything. Joe Rogan, who grilled Lazar for hours on his podcast, is suddenly rethinking it all.
You were talking about John Lear and John Lear's connection to Bob Lazar and the possibility that Lear was spreading disinformation.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Did we just get proof that Bob Lazar was telling the truth and that the secrets of UFO technology have been hidden for decades? This is the story everyone's talking about, and you're about to see why. The Lazar Code. For decades, the name Bob Lazar was uttered with the same half-smirk that people reserved for late-night radio callers, conspiracy theorists, and sci-fi writers who believed too much of their own fiction. He was the wild card, the engineer who went public with a tale too impossible to swallow, a story about alien craft hidden in the Nevada desert, gravity-bending engines, and an element so exotic that not even the world's best scientists could imagine it, let alone create it. As years went by, the world changed, technology exploded, and the government began admitting, piece by piece, that the sky was stranger than we thought. Suddenly, Bob Lazar didn't look quite so crazy. Joe Rogan, host of the world's biggest podcast, spent years on the fence about Bob Lazar. But as Rogan once admitted to his guest, if Bob's lying, my God, what a great liar. He's amazing at it, right? And he's been telling the same lie for 30 plus years. And then there's elements of it that, how would he know that? Rogan's skepticism was always tinged with awe, that nagging doubt that Lazar's story was just a little too detailed, a little too persistent, to dismiss outright. It was Rogan who helped bring Lazar's story back to the center of the world's attention, grilling him for hours, poking holes in every part of his story, and finding that somehow the fabric held. The story began in the late 1980s, when Lazar, a soft-spoken engineer, claimed he was hired to work at a secret facility called S4, just south of the infamous Area 51. His job? Reverse engineer propulsion systems from 9 recovered flying saucers. Not model planes or government prototypes, actual craft of unknown origin, powered by a reactor using an element that had not yet been discovered on Earth. That element, he said, was called 115. In those early interviews, Lazar spoke plainly, nervously, and always with a sense of urgency. He described a world behind the fence where gravity was just another tool, where engines bent space and time, and where scientists worked in utter secrecy, always under the threat of surveillance and, as he would later claim, real danger. He said the power source for these alien craft was a stable isotope of element 115, something that, at the time, did not exist anywhere outside his testimony. When the world first heard his story, it sounded like pure fantasy. How could anyone take him seriously? But Bob Lazar didn't waver. For more than 3 decades, he maintained the same story, never embellishing, never recanting, never getting caught in a contradiction. Joe Rogan once asked, and then there's elements of it. How would he know that? Like, how would he know about element 115? That question, the one that kept Rogan awake at night, was at the heart of what made Lazar's claims so hard to shake. In the years that followed, Bob Lazar became a folk legend and a pariah. Skeptics tore his background apart, found holes in his education records, pointed to his involvement with a legal brothel, and dismissed his claims as an elaborate hoax. But the details persisted. The fact that he had described a classified base, S4, that would only later be admitted to exist. The precise technical details he gave about the craft he worked on. The sport model, as he called it, wasn't just an alien ship in his story. It was a specific, engineered object, described down to the smallest components, and then there was the raid. Decades after Lazar first came forward, filmmakers Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp brought his story to a new generation. While filming the documentary, the FBI raided Lazar's business. Rogan, in disbelief, summed it up. They also raided him during the Jeremy Corbell documentary. While they're filming the documentary, the FBI raided his facility, and they said they were looking for something, and supposedly he has a version or a sample of stable element 115. That's supposedly what they were looking for. The timing was eerie, the message clear. After all these years, someone was still watching Bob Lazar. At the heart of the Lazar legend was the claim about element 115. When he first spoke about it, the element existed only on the periodic table of dreams. In the real world, it was called un pentium, a placeholder, an idea more than a substance. But in 2003, Russian scientists managed to synthesize a handful of atoms of what would become known as moscovium, element 115. It was real, but it wasn't stable. The newly created atoms decayed in fractions of a second. Rogan, marveling at this, said, "How soon after that raid was 115 synthesized? I think it was synthesized in Russia, being, well, synthesized by a particle collider." The implications were staggering. If Lazar had made this up, he had guessed the name, properties, and importance of a future scientific breakthrough decades before it happened. The skepticism never faded, but the cracks were starting to show. Even the most hardened debunkers admitted that some of Lazar's claims were simply too prescient to ignore. His description of gravity propulsion was echoed in new, unexplained Navy videos showing craft performing maneuvers that should have been impossible. His claim that he saw 9 different craft, matched by eyewitnesses who had never met him but described the same shapes. And then, of course, the element. He's sure that they showed him shit just to see if he'd say crazy shit, right? To see if he'd talk. All he cares about is what he saw, what he knows is real, Rogan observed. This was not the rambling of a true believer, but the measured, haunted testimony of someone who had seen the world behind the curtain and been changed forever. Lazar never tried to become a celebrity. He didn't chase the spotlight, didn't write a book, didn't go on a speaking tour. Instead, he lived quietly, building scientific equipment, raising a family, and refusing to embellish his story. For every wild claim, there was a corresponding fact that couldn't quite be dismissed. Rogan admitted, "Every time you try to call bullshit on him, I've tried so hard on so many things. People think I'm just some believer. I'm not, bro." The gravity of that statement was not lost on his audience. Joe Rogan, the ultimate skeptic, the man who prided himself on seeing through hoaxes and cons, was slowly being won over. The Lazar story became the gravitational center of modern ufology. Skeptics and believers alike found themselves orbiting the strange, persistent mass of details that refused to fade. As Rogan told his listeners, there's elements of it. How would he know that? How would he know about element 115? It wasn't just what Lazar claimed to have seen, it was what he knew, what he got right, and what science, decades later, began to confirm. But for every piece of corroborating evidence, there was another wave of mystery and denial. His records vanished from MIT and Caltech. His employment history was scrubbed. People who had worked with him at Los Alamos denied knowing him, until photographs surfaced showing him at the lab, waving to colleagues, walking the halls with an ease that only an insider would possess. Through it all, Joe Rogan's interest only grew. He pressed his guests, George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, and even Lazar himself, again and again. Each time, the story held up under scrutiny. Each time the world shifted a little closer to believing the impossible. The story of Bob Lazar, once dismissed as lunacy, was now at the center of the biggest shift in public perception about UFOs and government secrecy in decades. And then, in a twist worthy of Hollywood, the world started to catch up. The Pentagon confirmed the existence of secret UFO programs. Navy pilots went public with videos showing craft that defied explanation. Senators demanded answers. Suddenly, Lazar's claims didn't seem quite so outlandish. The world's most listened-to podcaster was now openly speculating that Bob Lazar might have been right all along. As Joe Rogan said, with a mixture of wonder and caution, I've become more positive on Lazar as I think he was at S4, Area 51, and I think there's going to be a lot of corroborating evidence that he was at least there, and a lot in his story checks. The pieces were finally falling into place. But the story was far from over. For every answer, new questions emerged. If Lazar was telling the truth, what else was hidden in the Nevada desert? What breakthroughs had been made in secret? Was the world ready to accept that the impossible was, in fact, possible? The Lazar Code was now open, and everyone from the Pentagon to the podcast studio was scrambling to solve it. What would come next would upend everything we thought we knew about UFOs, government secrecy, and the very laws of physics. For Joe Rogan, Bob Lazar, and millions of newly awakened minds, the question was no longer, is this real? It was, what happens now? Element 115, and the physics of the impossible. If there's a single detail that turned Bob Lazar's story from wild speculation into a decades-long obsession, it's the claim about Element 115. In 1989, the idea of such an element was pure fantasy. Lazar described it as the heart of the alien propulsion system, a substance that could bend gravity, allowing a craft to leap effortlessly through space. The element was crucial to this gravity propulsion system that it's a part of this reactor, Rogan recounted, his voice straining with incredulity. It gets bombarded with radiation, produces this gravity field, and allows you to just slingshot through the universe. At the time, scientists laughed. The periodic table had no room for such an exotic element. There was no slot for something so heavy, so unstable, that it might never even exist outside of theoretical models. But over the next 30 years, theoretical physics and atomic science advanced in directions nobody could have predicted. By 2003, element 115, now called moscovium, was synthesized in a Russian laboratory, not just once, but several times in quick, fleeting moments before it decayed. Suddenly, what Lazar described wasn't impossible anymore. How would he know about element 115? Rogan asked repeatedly on air. The detail was impossible to ignore, yet the synthesized element was unstable, decaying in microseconds, far too short to use for anything practical. This, Lazar said, was no surprise. He'd always claimed that the key to alien technology was a stable isotope of element 115, something produced in environments beyond Earth under conditions no human laboratory could duplicate. As Rogan relayed, wherever these beings are from, they obviously have a completely different environment, and they have a stable version of this element. This substance was the core of the craft's power, nothing we could make, but something Lazar insisted was real, perhaps a sample secretly locked away, waiting for a world ready to believe. Skeptics said it was all science fiction. But every year, new discoveries in quantum mechanics and nuclear physics chipped away at the impossible. The conversation turned more serious as video after video emerged of unexplained craft displaying capabilities that matched Lazar's descriptions. Rogan and his guests would analyze these videos, objects darting through the sky, accelerating without inertia, moving with silence and precision that no known aircraft could match. Some even wondered if a breakthrough in stable isotopes could be the real secret behind these sightings. "It's not outside of the realm of what we understand," Rogan said. "It's outside of the realm of what we can replicate. Now, one day we might catch up." For Lazar and Rogan, the impossible had become plausible. With every new sighting, every fragment of physical evidence, it seemed the world was inching closer to confirming what Bob Lazar had claimed all along, that we are not alone, and that physics itself might have secrets yet to be revealed. But if element 115 is real, and if someone has managed to unlock its power, what does that mean for the world as we know it? Could the next leap in science be hiding in plain sight, just waiting for us to accept that the future might already be here? The S4 files. Beneath the wild claims and stunning possibilities lies a human story, one of paranoia, loss, and the weight of forbidden knowledge. For Bob Lazar, telling the truth meant becoming an outcast. After his revelations about S4 and element 115, His life unraveled, records of his education vanished. Colleagues denied knowing him. He was followed, surveilled, and, as Rogan reminded listeners, even raided by the FBI decades after going public. They monitor your phone calls, monitor everything, Rogan said, recounting the surveillance Lazar endured. Turns out Bob's wife is having an affair. So they don't tell Bob that his wife's having an affair, but they cut off his job. You're too much of a potential to be emotionally unstable. We can't have you working on these top secret, super sensitive things. The psychological toll was immense. For every detail he revealed, Lazar paid a price, professionally, emotionally, and personally. The secrecy wasn't just about protecting technology, it was about control. Government agencies, private contractors, shadowy special access programs all worked to keep a lid on the extraordinary. For folks who don't know the whole story, Rogan said Bob allegedly was working on back-engineering these aircrafts, these vehicles, these spaceships, and in doing so, you have to have a very high level of clearance. Well, with that high level of clearance comes complete government surveillance. And then there were the threats. Lazar described feeling targeted, his family at risk. He claimed he was pushed into revealing the truth because he genuinely feared for his life. As Rogan said on the show, his motivation was he was seriously worried they were going to take him out. Yeah, because he knew so much and they had cut off his... The price of knowledge in this world was isolation. Despite it all, Bob Lazar never backed down. He didn't profit from his claims, didn't seek out the limelight. Instead, he became the canary in the coal mine, warning the public that something truly extraordinary was hidden just beneath the surface of everyday life. And if his warnings were true, what else had been hidden for decades, waiting to be uncovered? Vindication. Decades after Bob Lazar first spoke out, the world began to change. Navy pilots came forward, describing craft that matched his descriptions. Traveling faster than the speed of sound with no sonic boom, all transmedium, all domain. These things seem to defy typical propulsion, Rogan explained. The Pentagon confirmed the existence of secret UFO programs. Mainstream scientists started asking serious questions about gravity manipulation and exotic materials. Every time you try to call bullshit on him, I've tried so hard on so many things. People think I'm just some believer. I'm not, bro, Rogan confessed, now one of Lazar's most high-profile defenders. Piece by piece, the impossible became reality. Stable element 115, gravity propulsion, advanced craft, one after another. Lazar's claims found echoes in real-world discoveries. Journalist George Knapp, who broke Lazar's story in the late 1980s, shared his own journey from curiosity to conviction. You're probably one of the most important figures when it comes to journalism and UFOs, Rogan told Knapp during a podcast, highlighting the critical role media played in dragging the truth into the light. But even as new evidence mounted, the most important revelation was not a craft, or an element, or a government admission. It was a shift in public consciousness. What was once laughed at was now debated in the halls of Congress, dissected in laboratories, and discussed openly on the world's biggest podcast. Rogan's own verdict said it all. I've become more positive on Lazar, just insofar as I think he was at S4, Area 51, and I think there's going to be a lot of corroborating evidence that he was at least there, and a lot in his story checks. Lazar's story became the spark that lit a global firestorm of curiosity and skepticism, one that refuses to burn out. And now, as the evidence continues to mount, only one question remains. What are we really ready to believe? Conclusion. What began as the strange story of a single man in the desert has now become a mystery that refuses to die. Bob Lazar's claims, once dismissed as fantasy, are being vindicated, detail by detail, in a world that is only just waking up to the possibility that we are not alone, and that our universe is far stranger than we ever imagined. Joe Rogan put it best. If Bob's lying, my God, what a great liar. He's amazing at it, right? And he's been telling the same lie for 30 plus years. And then there's elements of it that, how would he know that? The truth may still be hidden behind locked doors and classified files, but every new discovery brings us one step closer to the edge, one step closer to accepting that, sometimes, the most incredible stories are the ones we can't quite explain away. So, what do you think? Was Bob Lazar telling the truth all along? Are we finally on the verge of uncovering the real story behind decades of cover-ups, denial, and secrecy? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries the world can't ignore. The truth is out there, and maybe, just maybe, it was in front of us the whole time.